English translation 887th contact Wednesday, the 8th of May 2024, 15:09 hours.
Hello.
There you are.
It is important. That is why I told Bermuda that you should come here as soon as possible. Because it has become urgent that the correct sign of peace. Oh, here comes someone else. But greetings and welcome. Of course you too, dear friend. Even if I do not know you. But you are both welcome. Who are you, and do you even speak my language?
Greetings also, Edouard, and thank you for your welcome. Catalan does not understand you when you speak Swiss German, but he is fluent in German, so it is good if we use it today.
Oh, sorry, I did not know that. Greetings and welcome, Catalan. But since I am curious, what does your name mean?
Now I understand what you are saying. Thank you for your welcome, and you can understand the meaning of my name as he who keeps the register, which also corresponds to my job, as I am the chairman of the committee. Todd told me that your name is Edouard Albert, but that you are called Billy, which prompts me to ask you what you want to be called.
With my name, that is to say what people call me, I have no problem with that. Eva, who is my dear partner of around 45 years, simply calls me Billy, as do all my friends, and there are many thousands of them. Few human beings simply call me by my birth name, Edouard, so now you have to decide for yourself what you want to call me.
Then I will choose the name Billy.
Is also fine with me. But may I ask why you came here with Pta'a?
Ta will explain that to you.
Yes. Bermuda yesterday photographed both Bernadette's and your expanded letter regarding the runic death symbol and the peace symbol and immediately forwarded them to me, which I have submitted to the committee for judgment. Because I think this is a very important moment to bring to the Earth humans, as well as to explain how high the value or non-value of a symbol is to be defined. And since your endeavor is now about creating and spreading awareness about the value of the peace symbol and the disvalue of the death symbol, the entire extensive committee of our world and our entire federation has decided to participate in this. As a result of all the knowledge, information and data that we receive daily from our observers and registrars here on Earth about what is happening worldwide, for which Bermuda, Quetzal, and Jana, and also Florina are currently responsible, who are in charge of this very important task for us, we are very well informed about everything. Consequently, with regard to all the explanations of the symbolism, we would like to add a few more things of importance, which we would like to formulate for you as follows, and which you should now add to this letter.
I have also saved the whole thing in my computer. Consequently, I can add everything to the text right in this one.
Good, then let us start right away. Catalan has the notes in his device, so he and you can do this work together.
Then the following is the result.
The whole thing that now arises, but I do not call it off, and then I also do not write it down.
There is no need for that.
Then the following, which you will please insert after my words, as I instruct you, it is.
On the Symbols of Creation Energy teaching by Bernadette Brand, Switzerland.
As a matter of principle, every single symbol of creation energy teaching is absolute and completely neutral, which is also true of the peace symbol. However, it is equally fundamental to note that each individual symbol has its own unmistakable and typical formal language, which might make it unique. This language of form includes not only the effective linear shapes, but also the position of the symbol within the wide black frame, which is essential for every symbol, as well as the proportions of the line thicknesses and, if present, also for the colors. Consequently, also for the overall individual appearance of each symbol, which is not only significant but very important. The language of form is a type of archetypal visual communication that addresses the unconscious and conscious perception of the viewer. Based on the archetypal knowledge that is centuries old and available to every human being due to the information stored in their own creation energy line, their unconscious absorbs the messages of the language of form and begins to interpret and correctly understand them on the basis of the knowledge stored in the creation energy form. This then triggers corresponding impulses and forwards and releases them to the all-overlaying consciousness complex, which then begins to react in accordance with the symbol and generates associations, ideas, and reactions, which are absorbed in the conscious mind and processed in accordance with the language of forms and realized externally as action. Every symbol is complex and absolute in itself and strictly neutral and passive in every wise. It therefore causes absolutely nothing negative or positive in the consciousness of the human being, but is explicitly merely an expression or carrier of certain negative, balanced, or positive information, the interpretations of which are made and molded by the human being himself. This results from his thinking, which arises through environmental influences such as education and even indoctrination, which is then implemented and controlled by his entire consciousness complex, precisely and corresponding to the information values of the respective symbol. The existing and worldwide circulating false peace symbol with the rune of death, which truly corresponds to a death symbol and hate symbol, was conceived and created in 1958 by the British graphic artist Gerald Holtham on behalf of the British Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, without any foreknowledge that his work would call for evil, war, crime, suffering, misery, death, and destruction. So it became absolutely inevitable that the false peace symbol, the Celtic death rune symbol, would cause division, strife, and destruction to this day. As is evident every day since this symbol has been falsely and irresponsibly interpreted as a peace symbol and thus falsely used worldwide, spreading strife, discord, war, terror, and death. Even a superficial examination of the symbol makes it clear that it has nothing whatsoever to do with peace, but with gavolt, aggression, destruction, and annihilation. The symbol death existence, on which the rune of death is based, is associated with division and discord, hatred, war, terror, murder, and destruction, as can be seen in ever more blatant form every day since this symbol has been falsely and irresponsibly interpreted as a peace symbol and spread worldwide. The number of armed conflicts on Earth since the creation of this symbol of death with the rune of death, invented in 1958, is as serious as it has ever been on this planet. Up to the month of May 2024, there have been 91 insurgencies, wars of liberation, wars of occupation, civil wars, border wars, invasion wars, religious wars, state wars, secession wars, acts of terrorism, and other armed conflicts that have claimed many millions of lives. Even a superficial look at the symbol makes it clear that it cannot have anything to do with growth, progress, and peacefulness, because a fallen tree with its crown wise to earth is the epitome of violence, the end, decay, and death. Since most human beings think in an uncontrolled way, they process the archetypal information of the symbol in exactly the same way as the content that this symbol comprehensively describes, which is why they then unconsciously or uncontrollably and thoughtlessly contribute everything they can to realize the meaning of the symbol and make it a fact, without also opposing the corruption and the end of which the symbol speaks in the slightest. The human beings who misinterpret the symbol of death as a symbol of peace do not realize their own thoughts and impulses and do not control them, thus making themselves slaves to the content of the symbol, which is basically completely neutral and simply describes a certain state or circumstance, which they unintentionally and believingly implement and allow to become reality and fact. In contrast to the symbol death, mortal existence, the symbol peace contains a rich formal language pointing to growth, which, like all other symbols, contains completely neutral archetypal information, but which also points to peaceful and rich growth as well as to tranquility and progress or evolution, and concludes this statement. The tree full of life, its crown wise to the sky. Enthroned on a bubbling spring, promises flourishing growth and prosperity, which is symbolized by the stylized lotus flower that springs from the crown of the tree, making it the actual tree of life. Contemplating the symbol awakens peaceful and progressive associations in human beings and allows them to come to the surface, pointing to prosperity, growth, and a rich harvest, whereby human beings trigger and build up valuable impulses, intuitions and ideas, as well as thoughts, and a striving for peacefulness, growth, blossoming, and progress within themselves, because they tap into their own subterranean knowledge of their creative life energy and endeavor to build and expand this continuously. This is simply because, by perceiving the symbol, the human being consciously becomes powerful in his clear understanding and reason, as a result of which he absorbs the archetypal information of the symbol's formal language and utilizes it in an evolutionary way in order to transform everything into the value of correct action, work, and behavior in this respect.
So that is the work done. It is quite a bit, but I think it is good and correct.
This is the end of my mission. Consequently, I am leaving you now. However, I will do some more things with Quetzal, Bermunda, Florina, and Ninjana for a few days, by getting to know this world a little. I will also not fail to visit you again during this time and discuss some things with you. But now I am going to leave, so I will see you again soon, Billy.
So goodbye, Catalan, goodbye.
He will be back several times because his interest caused him to take some time off and choose a replacement and spend about 30 days exploring some things on Earth with Quetzal.
I was actually going to ask him his age, but I forgot again.
I can also tell you that he is 614 years old.
Amazing, because that is about what I estimated, about 600 years. But now this letter here was written by Mrs. From and refers to a telephone conversation we had. As I have already told you on the phone, I would like to know what the floods are all about that have been affecting us in Germany for years now. As my daughter says, you predicted some 45 years ago that Germany would drown, which is also said to be written in the so-called contact notes that you publish. However, as my daughter does not publish these notes and keeps them locked away and does not give them to me, which is why I cannot read everything myself, I would ask you to send me extracts from them. I am very interested in them, and so that is what is actually important, and Mrs. is asking me. But I have told her that our FIGU contact reports can be viewed on the internet if she wants to read them, and I have written to her about what Michael has found for me in this regard, where she can find the reports, and he has given me the following information. So I will also mention her question in the contact conversation and talk to you about it, so that she can read the whole thing in the report that we are talking about now. In addition, Bernadette has picked out some of what was said earlier in conversations regarding the coming of the weather and the disaster as a result of the lousy and irresponsible actions and criminal machinations of the Earthlings, which caused climate change. Consequently, she found the following regarding the questioned. Volume 3, 131st Contact, dated the 15th of June 1980, page 488. Here is some reading regarding the coming great rains. Volume 17, 719th Contact, dated the 21st of April 2019, page 373. However, there are other conversations listed in other contact reports that deal with the storms, such as a conversation that took place in the center at the beginning of the contact conversations and dealt with the fact that Germany in particular will be swamped, so to speak, by rainfall. However, Germany is already running the risk of another danger, which has nothing to do with storms and could also threaten to spread to the whole of Europe, which is already, in a wise way, fanatical Islamic groups in Germany are demonstratively forcing the creation of a caliphate, which will result in that will.
But you should not declare that openly.
Of course not, because I am only telling you. As a result, I will just put my dots there when I recall and write down the conversation, as I will do when I talk about what will happen if. What I can say without putting dots is that the completely crazy neo-Nazis in the German government are about to put forward demands that the NATO murderous organization should invade the part of Ukraine not yet invaded by Russia in order to protect it. So it is not enough with the madness that the Frenchman Macron wants to start and get the likewise. Neo-Nazi-inspired rulers and military leaders of other European countries to send military personnel to war in Ukraine and to leave their lives there and to be buried as corpses. Many mercenaries from various countries are already doing this, including Swiss mercenaries who are also engaged in an evil hobby in Ukraine out of sheer lust for murder.
Increasingly, due to the low intelligence of the peoples, more and more people incapable of leadership are coming to the leading power of the states. Because the peoples elect incompetent persons for these positions, or such persons are elected by the state leaders themselves.
You can say that again. Unfortunately, this is also the case here in Switzerland, where the Federal Assembly note, consisting of the National Council Representation of the People, 200 members, and the Council of States Representation of the Cantons, 46 members, elects the Federal Council and its co-federal councillors itself, without the people having any say in the matter. At least that is the way I see it. In addition, we have the injustice that if the Federal Council decides and orders something, nothing can be done about it, because what comes from it is law. That is called democracy.
This and many other things have actually been talked about many times over the last few decades. But in many cases, mostly in private. But you do not retrieve and write down these conversations, which would also be too much of a good thing, as you say each time. The G.
I would not have any time left over to devote to my various other jobs and commitments. Besides, I do not want to interfere in the business of the government, and therefore also do not want to politicize, but only ever point out what is fact and what is being done for good or ill, and that has nothing to do with politicizing.
That is right, because so far it would be several thousand talking points that
I would have had to retrieve and write down, and that would have just been impossible. But what else needs to be said about all of this? What we were talking about earlier, namely the swamping of Germany. Then it is not just the country that is suffering from very severe flooding as a result of climate change caused by global warming, but the whole world. So not only the whole continent of Europe down to the south, as well as the west and east, will be affected, as I saw with your father Svath back in the 1940s in the leaps into the future, but the whole world, that is to say all countries and areas of the earth without exception. And that means that even the Arctic and Antarctic will be affected, and that there will be weather devastation around the globe that will seem like antediluvian storms to many earthlings. Believers in God will regard everything as God's punishment, as will also many other delusional believers, because earthlings simply do not realize that they themselves are to blame for all the disaster. This is due to the immense mass of their overpopulation and their criminal and destructive machinations on the planet. The poisoning of the atmosphere, climate change, but also the destruction or complete annihilation of nature and all its areas of all kinds. This is in addition to the near extinction or even total extinction of many wild animals and many other wild creatures of all genera and species, but also of the plant world, which currently affects a total of around 60,000 of all genera and species per year, which disappear forever and irrevocably from the diversity of the Earth's fauna and flora through extinction. And this is solely through the fault of human beings, who are probably multiplying like rats due to their insane religious delusions and belief in God, because this imaginary criminal is said to have said Genesis 1:28, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every creature that moveth upon the earth, whatever the case may be." Human beings have also multiplied since the year 1700. Since, according to Svath's calculation, as I have listed here, 536,718,004 human beings populated the earth worldwide, which corresponds absolutely to the carrying capacity of planet Earth, to such an extent that the Earthling has far exceeded the carrying capacity. Just 100 years later, the Earth's population had already reached 892,333,410, And in 1900, the figure of 1 billion had already been exceeded, with Svath already counting 1,660,990,034 Earthlings. And in the year 1925, the rampant mass of Earth humans was counted with 2,008 and 401, 932. And in the year 1960, according to your count, the whole mass had already risen to over 3 billion, namely to 3,050,382,081. At the beginning of this year 2024, the overpopulation number according to your count was now 9,446, 218, 012 human beings. Since the Earth is a planet that is able to support and feed around 500,000 million human beings without any problems, and provide them with everything they need and with every development also with what they need. Until one day the planet passes away and becomes completely and absolutely uninhabitable for all life. The number of overpopulation in 2024 is around 18 times exceeded. The resulting problems cannot be recognized and grasped either now or for a certain time in the future with all possible futuristic technology and due to the lack of understanding and reason. The problems can also no longer be recognized and grasped with the AI technology that is emerging very quickly and still seems futuristic at present. The emerging irresponsibility regarding the lack of control instead of the important and necessary control of AI, that is to say, artificial intelligence, will bring so much disaster to all of humanity that we wish it had never been invented. Earthlings will experience their blue miracles as a result of AI getting out of control, because the first steps have already been taken by equipping AI constructs, initially with 4 legs, with deadly weapons that will inevitably be used against human beings in the future. This is because AI is also already so irresponsibly developed that it has become more perfect at lying and cheating than all the lies and cheating of a human being who is passionate about this, causing him to turn green and blue with shame and crawl into the ground. This is precisely because everything surpasses the possibilities available to him in this respect, so that it will no longer be possible for any honest human being, and also for all liars and defrauders, to be able to distinguish between the truth and lies and deception. But once again, I have deviated from the actual topic, for which there is still a lot to say. Namely, that the machinations of Earth humans are not only fully to blame for the fact that the atmosphere is poisoned and contains too little oxygen. The truth is that this humanity has also destroyed the climate, which has turned into a disaster, because the fact that the criminal machinations have driven the existence of the Earth, including all ecosystems, nature and the entire fauna and flora, to the brink of their ability to exist, is not fully recognized by the experts, or if it is recognized, it is deliberately concealed from the public, because very probably large sums of hush money are flowing. Well, the only thing that can be said about this is that the world wants to be deceived, also at the expense of life and the possibility of existence of human beings here on Earth. And as incomprehensible as it may sound, there are still many idiots, effectively they cannot be called anything else, who claim that there is no climate change, while other delusional idiots believe that everything will be good, because the imaginary God will fix everything and bring everything back into perfect order. But there are also others, idiots, as I call the lowly intelligent and therefore all non-thinkers or even the illusory thinkers. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I call idiots idiots, because it should be clearly stated that I do not despise idiot human beings as human beings. Just as I do not consider these human beings to be organically ill and deformed, who are not capable of thinking and therefore cannot think for themselves. If they really endeavored to think clearly and worthily and did not indulge in religious or worldly beliefs, then these human beings would be capable of their own, that is to say, independent thinking in a worthy manner. But now, to continue with my topic. In future, no country on Earth will be spared from the tremendous storms and violent windstorms when nature increasingly rises up against the irresponsible machinations of the Earthling. This, just as the planet itself will also become more active against the actions of human beings and begin to stir in various wise ways. And this will not end with parts of mountains collapsing, earthquakes shaking the earth, and fire rising from the earth. So this will not be the only evil, For nature will begin to affect human beings themselves in such a way that the capacity for procreation and fertility will increasingly dwindle, just as the ability to live will also deteriorate due to a reduction in the function of organ stability.
That is all you should mention.
You are actually right, because it is pointless to talk anyway. And when I think that idiots of scientists, believers of religions and sects, secular believers and other idiots are still stubbornly believing and claiming that there is no climate change, then the majority of Earthlings really cannot be expected to have enough sense to see the truth and understand it. The human beings cannot be helped, and therefore also cannot be made to realize that rampant overpopulation is populating the entire Earth. And as a result of the human beings' degenerate and criminal machinations, even against the planet itself through their irresponsible exploitation of resources, as well as against all ecosystems through their poisoning, etc., and also against nature and all fauna and flora, their destruction, annihilation, and extinction, all life, all existence, and all existence is gone. And the fact is that it can never be made good, because the immense damage that has been done to the planet, to all ecosystems, to nature, to all bodies of water, to all nature and its fauna and flora in general in just over 300 years through all kinds of criminal machinations of Earth humans is so immensely serious that it can never be restored to its original state. Not even halfway, but only slightly. All the damage caused by the culpability and destructive machinations of human beings on Earth, and what was caused by their actions, cannot be made good. But he pretends that there is no misery and need, and also no poverty, etc., and contrary to the truth, he claims that war solves problems and creates peace, although this corresponds to a blatant lie and deception that could not be more misleading. This is because war not only brings suffering, misery, death, destruction, and annihilation, etc., but after a victory causes hatred of occupation, even more so lack of freedom and peace, as well as all kinds of evil and so on. Well, there are only a very few human beings who think about what is being said. For example, I was asked by telephone for a more detailed interpretation of what I said and explained recently about sexual practices. This in the sense that this is natural to every life form. It is obviously necessary for me to come back to this topic and explain that in any case, naturalness, if I now start from human beings alone, although it concerns all living beings, also in fauna and flora, is always and exclusively based on the fact that human beings themselves conceive, determine, practice, and therefore might, etc., this behavior. So if a human being displays or exercises a certain behavior, way of acting, way of speaking, or mannerism, then he creates the corresponding appearance. Behavior, demeanor, his actions, that is to say, his demeanor, his way of behaving, and thus his actions himself, and indeed everything as his habitus, his basic attitude, dictates. And the human being forms this habitus himself in every respect, which means that it happens completely naturally when the human being, since he has free will and also uses it voluntarily, forms his habitus in a completely natural way and allows himself to inherit, or inherits it, or anchors it in himself. The human being thus allows his basic attitude to develop within him in a completely natural way, namely through his free will, which he inherits and gives birth to, through his speech or actions to the outside world, or which he exercises by carrying out his basic attitude. Thus, the appearance or manners and actions of a person form the totality of their good or bad preferences, habits, the nature of their social behavior, but also the forms of good, evil, or degeneracy. All forms, however, are naturally created according to free will, but the origin can be different, so it can be based on a wrong form of education, imitation, indoctrination, emotional arousal in false teaching, or in lustful degeneration. The human being's behavior, his entire habitus, is naturally formed, and naturally so because everything and everyone is created and formed according to free will, both positive and negative, good and bad, degenerate and virtuous. So also in human understanding the normal and the abnormal, as these exist in many forms.
That will probably be understandable to the normal thinker, but the whole thing will not, despite your efforts to explain it.
I am afraid I am no more eloquent than that, so I cannot make everything so clear for all human beings, especially precisely for those who do not bother to think for themselves or are simply used to believing. But here I still have this letter, where it says that I should say something about this Macron in France, because...
And do you want to say something in response?
No, I do not want to, because you know I am not involved in politics at all and never have been before in my life, nor will I be now or in the future. When I say something, I only do so in such a way that I make a point about one or more politicians when something is not right, or on the contrary is good, which is to be pointed out, although I also very rarely name names. When making such statements, however, I am very careful never to engage in politics, even in the slightest wise. Therefore, if I do not reply to this letter and still talk about Macron, then it is only that I have established that this man Macron is lowly intelligent, and also a very misguided, peace-endangering, partisan, and very dangerous as well as low-minded, conscienceless, and irresponsible warmonger. This lunatic is just as lowly intelligent as all the other fools, idiots and firecrackers in government, as well as the supporters from the nations, who supply weapons, ammunition and money to Zelensky and praise him and everyone else in a partisan manner, as well as other Putin, Netanyahu, the Hamas leaders, and, in the USA, this crazy ex-President Trump and the senile President Biden, as well as all those who partisanly supply weapons, ammunition, and money for any war, or who advocate this as part of the population. All of these people are lousy creatures, irresponsible and partisans of around 50 countries, who are themselves just delusional, bogus thinkers, and who are now allowing themselves to be rashly provoked by Macron into threatening an open world war and even nuclear war. This man is really stupidly willing to do this thoughtlessly, and he is propagandizing to send his own French military into the war between Ukraine and Russia. The fact that such an idiot and useless oaf has been elected to the helm of government in France is undoubtedly proof that the state authorities responsible for this and the relevant section of the population are as morbidly intelligent as beanstraw, just like this Zelensky in Ukraine and the mad genocidal mass murderer Netanyahu in Israel. And last but not least, those responsible and criminals in the hegemonist USA, who underhandedly and insidiously provoked the Ukraine war, are now secretly directing it and giving billions and supplying weapons and ammunition. An unparalleled crime that is also supported by many animated states, whereby, as is said and suspected by large sections of the population, Switzerland is also one of the lowly intelligent and donates aid money to Ukraine and thus to Zelensky. Money that would be better spent on the poor in Switzerland and would alleviate a great deal of hardship for them. But the rulers in Bern do not waste a thought on this. Instead, they let it go good with money from the coffers, which are always filled to overflowing with taxpayers' money, and then in many cases simply flushed away, pointlessly.
That corresponds to what actually is.
Exactly. But it is just going through my mind that I am sure my attention will once again be drawn to flushing when the contact report is read. Because the prevailing opinion all round is that the correct thing to say is squandering. However, and this should be said, this only applies to the German language, because in Swiss German it has been pronounced verpulvern in various dialects since time immemorial. For example, in the old and now probably bygone Bulacher dialect, or Bulidialect Bulak dialect, which still sometimes breaks through for me as an old Bulamer. This is just with individual words that have simply stayed with me from the old dialect and automatically break through, even though I have also largely adapted to the language usage here in Zurich's Toss Valley.
Dialects prevail in all languages, after all, and this often leads to misunderstandings, which unfortunately cannot be avoided and is also the case here. So there is a need for clarification, which you have also done now, so this matter is clear. But now I have a question for you. In Father's annals, I read that you were together on 2 islands in the seas, which Father called strange islands in his annals, as he is said to have also told some Earth humans this, as he wrote. He wrote that they suddenly disappeared for inexplicable reasons, but that they reappeared just as suddenly years later. Can you tell me something about that?
Not much, because Schwath must have investigated the mystery of these islands and found out that they were floating islands, which, as he explained to me, were islands whose lowest subsoil consisted of a natural float that kept the islands, which were quite large and populated with various plants, afloat. Over time, however, this natural float would fill up with sand or earth or something, causing the island to sink into the sea and disappear. Over decades or centuries, the collected sand or earth slowly detached itself from the floating body, allowing the island to rise again and float on the sea. This is what Svath explained to me. That is all I know. Except that you might be interested to know that one of the islands had disappeared when we went to visit it again some 140 years after the first visit.
I have not looked into the very, very extensive annals that far, so there is a lot I do not know yet.
Just let yourself be surprised by what your father has written down. But something else. Jose wrote me the following from Brazil, because he thinks it is important that the world is informed about what is really going on and what is really going on, but what is usually not told to the public, but kept secret. Here you can read it for yourself.
This is a bit much. Well, yeah, anyway, I want to read it.
Dear friend, since I can no longer find out in which contact report, under which number, with which date, and in which year it was talked about the tire microparticles that are produced by the wear and tear of car tires and truck tires and brakes, and that are released into the atmosphere and worldwide into the environment, I counsel you to give an excerpt from the contact reports with the numbers and dates in which this topic about. The very serious environmental pollution from car tires and truck tires and brakes is published together with this confirming scientific research on this topic. Note Bernadette, 541st contact of the 2nd of June, 2012, Pleiadian Pleiadian contact reports, page 485, Dear friend Billy Meyer, hello, how are you? Dear Billy, there really are a lot of people with an academic background in science in large scientific research institutions who read the contact report secretly and quietly. I am sending you here two very important messages that confirm what has been published about that. Microparticles produced by car tires when they wear out on the asphalt of motorways and roads all over the world. It would be very interesting for FIGU to publish the scientific reports that confirm the truth in the contact reports. Salome and warm regards from Jose Barreto Silva, Brazil.
Unraveling the Secrets of Microplastics, released by Tires by Sandrine Peroud, EPFL, École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne.
In Switzerland, tire and road abrasion particles are one of the largest sources of microplastics entering the environment. However, the chemical compounds contained in these particles and their effects are still largely unknown. In order to close this knowledge gap, scientists from EPFL École Polytechnique, Fédérale de Lausanne, and two other Swiss research institutes are conducting a study to investigate the toxicity of the compounds contained in tire particles and their uptake by living organisms. The first phase of the study has just been completed. The study, which began in April 2020, is sponsored by a consortium of leading tire manufacturers. The two other research institutes collaborating with EPFL are the Swiss Center for Applied Ecotoxicology Ecotox Center, which is coordinating the project, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology, EWAG. The first phase was completed with two publications in Environmental Science and Technology, end of November 2021 and end of October 2022. Thibault Massett, postdoc at Cell Central Environmental Laboratory, is the lead author of the two articles. These articles specifically address the solubilization and bioavailability of compounds from tire particles in the digestive system of rainbow trout, Oncorhynchus mycis. Effect of food composition. For their investigations, the scientists used an innovative in vitro approach based on simulated gastric and intestinal fluids. They analyzed 11 compounds and found that the rate of solubilization in gastrointestinal fluids ranges from 0.06% to 44.1%, and that this rate can vary depending on the food consumed. One particular compound they investigated was 6-PPD quinone 6 PPDQ, a toxic byproduct of the oxidation of 6-PPD, an antioxidant widely used in the tire industry. When tire particles containing 6-PPDQ are ingested together with amphipods, the compound dissolved in the fish gut is increased. For other chemical compounds, however, the joint intake has the opposite effect. Further experiments are currently underway to investigate the toxicity of numerous other substances in tire particles. These compounds are more complicated than standard polymers such as polystyrene and PET, and there are probably hundreds of them, says Florian Breiter, head of EPFL's Central Environmental Laboratory CEL, and corresponding author of the two papers. Block quote: most research today focuses on microplastic pollution from packaging and waste. But microplastics from tires account for 30 to 40% of plastic pollution in the environment. It is therefore also worth investigating this type of pollution. Byproducts and their aging. The aim of the study is to determine the bioavailability, bioaccumulation, and toxicity of compounds from tire particles and related additives. Once Phase 1 has been completed, the scientists will investigate in Phase 2 how the compounds are passed on in the food chain, for example, from insect larvae to rainbow trout, Oncorhynchus mycis. The scientists also want to investigate the byproducts of tire particle compounds and how these compounds decompose over time. One example is 6-PPDQ, which is formed when 6-PPD, which is added to the rubber compound during tire production, comes into contact with O2 and O3 from the environment. According to a 2021 study published in the journal Science, 6-PPDQ was responsible for the acute salmon die-off in Seattle's Elliott Bay. Tire manufacturers need to take a more holistic view of their products and consider the instability of some of the chemicals they use, says Florian Breiter. These chemicals can degrade and form unintended byproducts that are sometimes toxic. Rubber soot and heavy metals. A federal report on plastics in the environment, published on the 23rd of September 2022, shows that tire and road abrasion is one of the main causes of microplastic pollution in Switzerland. The resulting particles consist of 60% rubber, 30% soot, and 10% heavy metals. In Switzerland, over 13,500 tons of these particles are produced every year, of which around 8,900 tons end up in the air, soil, and water. An EPFL study published in 2018 in the journal Track Trends in Analytical Chemistry shows that it is estimated that up to 61% of the microplastics that end up in Lake Geneva come from tire and road abrasion. Scientists do not yet know all the chemical compounds contained in these particles, and also do not know what consequences this could have. Further information, Thibault-Masset et al., Bioaccessibility of Organic Compounds Associated with Tire Particles, using a fish in vitro digestive model, Solubilization Kinetics and Effects of Food Co-ingestion, Environmental Science Technology 2022. Day 10.1021A. Estimated 2C04291 Thibault-Masset et al. In vitro digestion of tire particles in a fish model, Oncorhynchus mycis. Solubilization kinetics of heavy metals and effects of food. Co-ingestion Environmental Science Technology 2021. DOI 10.1021 ACEs. Estimated 1C04385 Julien Boucher et al. Microplastic fluxes in stocks in Lake Geneva Basin. Track Trends in Analytical Chemistry 2018. DOI 10.1016J. Track 2018. Point 11. 037 translation into German by Jose Barreto Silva Brazilian. Friday the 3rd of May 2024. Source original in English phys.org 2 11 Unraveling Secrets microplastics _HDML.
The toxicity of tires is being scrutinized again after the salmon die-off by Jim Robbins, KFF Health News, the 1st of May, 2024.
For decades, concern about pollution from cars has focused on what comes out of the tailpipe. Now, researchers and regulators say we need to pay more attention to toxic emissions from tires as vehicles roll down the road. At the top of the list of concerns is a chemical called asterisk 6-PPD, which is added to rubber tires to make them last longer. When tires wear out on the road, asterisk 6-PPD is released. It reacts with ozone to form another chemical, asterisk 6-PPDQ, which can be extremely toxic, so much so that it has been linked to repeated fish kills in Washington state. Asterisk note from JBS, 6-PPD stands for the chemical N-N-phenylphenylene. It is a chemical that prevents wear and tear on car tires and extends their life. When 6-PPD is exposed to air, it reacts with ozone to form 6-PPD quinone. The problems with tires do not end there. Tires are primarily made of natural and synthetic rubber, but they also contain hundreds of other components, often including steel and heavy metals such as copper, lead, cadmium, and zinc. When car tires wear out, the rubber breaks down into particles, both into parts that can be seen with the naked eye and also into microparticles. Tests by a British company, Emissions Analytics, found that a car's tires emit 1 trillion ultrafine particles per kilometer driven, that is 5 to 9 pounds of rubber per internal combustion engine car per year. Block quote. And what is in those particles is a secret that no one really understands and is kept top secret by the tire manufacturers, said Nick Molden, CEO of Emissions Analytics. We cannot think of another consumer product that is so widely available in the world and used by virtually everyone where so little is known about what is in it. Regulators have only just begun to address the issue of toxic tires. Although some action has already been taken in relation to 6-PPD, the chemical was identified by a team of researchers led by scientists at Washington State University and the University of Washington who were trying to figure out why coho salmon Oncorhynchus casuch, returning to Seattle area streams to spawn, were dying in large numbers. Commissioned by the Washington Stormwater Center, the scientists tested around 2,000 substances to find out what was causing the salmon die-off. And in 2020, they announced that they had found the culprit. 6-PPD, the Yurok tribe of Northern California, along with 2 other West Coast Native American tribes, petitioned the Environmental Protection Agency to ban the chemical. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, said it was considering new regulations for the chemical. We cannot stand idly by while 6-PPD kills the fish that feed us, Joseph L. James, chairman of the Yurok tribe, said in a statement. This deadly toxin has no place in any salmon-bearing watershed. California has taken initial steps to regulate the chemical and last year classified tires containing it as a priority product, requiring manufacturers to search for and test substitutes. 6-PPD plays a critical role in the safety of tires on California's roads. And currently there are no widely available safer alternatives, said Carl Palmer, Deputy Director of the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. Block quote, for this reason, Our framework is ideally suited to find alternatives to 6-PPD that will continue to ensure the safety of tires on California's roads while protecting California's fish populations and the communities that rely on them. The U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association, USTMA, says it has mobilized a consortium of 16 tire manufacturers to conduct an alternatives analysis. Ann Forrestal-Luke, president and CEO of the USTMA, said this will be the most effective and comprehensive examination of whether there is currently a safer alternative to 6-PPD in tires. However, Molden said there is a catch. If they do not investigate, they are not allowed to sell in the state of California, he said. If they investigate and do not find an alternative, they can continue to sell. They do not have to find a substitute. And today, there is no alternative to 6-PPD. California is also considering a request from the California Stormwater Quality Association to classify tires containing the heavy metal zinc as a priority product and require manufacturers to look for an alternative. Zinc is used in the vulcanization process to increase the strength of the rubber. However, nothing has been done about tire particles, although the problem is becoming more acute with the spread of electric cars. Due to their faster acceleration and greater torque, electric vehicles wear out tires faster and emit an estimated 20% more tire particles than the average petrol car. A recent study in Southern California found that tire and brake emissions in Anaheim account for 30% of PM2.5, a small particulate air pollutant, while exhaust emissions account for 19%. Tests by emissions analytics have shown that tires cause up to 2,000 times more particulate pollution than tailpipes. These particles end up in water and air and are often ingested with food. Ultrafine particles, even smaller than PM2.5, are also emitted from tires, can be inhaled and enter the brain directly. New research suggests that microparticles from tires should be classified as a pollutant of very high concern. Note from JBS. PM are fine particles in the air measured as PM2.5 and are so small that they can penetrate deep into the airways and reach the lungs, causing short-term health effects such as eye, nose, throat, and lung irritation, coughing, sneezing, a runny nose, and shortness of breath. An important indicator of air quality is the amount of PM2.5 in the air. PM stands for particulate matter, and the 2.5 refers to the size. For a better understanding, these are particles with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less. In a report published last year, researchers at Imperial College London said the particles could damage the heart, lungs, and reproductive organs and cause cancer. Human beings who live or work near roads, often on low incomes, are more exposed to the toxic substances. Tires are also an important source of microplastics. According to a report by the Pew Charitable Trust and the British company Systemic, more than 3/4 of the microplastics that end up in the oceans come from the synthetic rubber in tires. And there are still many unknowns about tire emissions, which can be particularly complex to analyze because heat and pressure can convert the tire components into other compounds. One open research question is whether 6-PPDQ affects human beings and what health problems, if any, it might cause. In a study published in the journal Environmental Science and Technology Letters, high levels of the chemical were found in urine samples from a region of southern China, with levels highest in pregnant women. The discovery of 6-PPDQ, says Nick Molden, has sparked renewed interest in the effects of tires on health and the environment, and he expects to see a wealth of new research in the coming years. The pieces of the puzzle are slowly coming together, he said. But it is a 1,000-piece puzzle, not a 200-piece puzzle. Translation into German by Jose Barreto Silva, Brazil. Friday, the 3rd of May, 2024, 22:03 hours source, original in English. Phys.org 205 toxicity fresh scrutiny salmon, die_dot_HTML.
So,
I can see that certain factors are being considered, but that there should also be effective thoughts about really valuable and effective countermeasures, so that not only the tip of the dangerous evil can be broken off, but the whole evil can be brought to an end. But now, Edward, I have to go my own way, for I have only come here in an extraordinary way for the sake of the peace sign, which the committee is still working on and wishes to see used in the wise way it is now being used.
of course, I also suspected as much, but it was gratifying that we were able to talk about some things anyway.
Then I will leave now if there is nothing else that needs to be discussed.
No, so goodbye then, dear friend, and see you again soon.
Goodbye, my friend. But I still want to say that it might be a little longer before I can come back here, because there is a few things I have to do that will take a little longer.
That is no big deal, because Bermunda and Quetzal also come quite often, as do Injana and Florena. If something important comes up, they are there to discuss it with.
Yes, there will be no shortage of them. But goodbye now, Edward.
Take care and goodbye, Ptah.